Good
Hi,
morning.
how are you doing?
Doing good, thank you.
Good evening. How was the weekend?
Weekend was good, but work day has started, so it's like back to back.
Okay.
What about yours?
Yeah, it went well. So my weekend ended 2 days back.
Oh,
It's
okay, okay.
Tuesday today. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. So before we proceed with today's session, let's just go back and do a quick recap of what we have learned till today. Okay. I think that is required because we have already gone through a lot of the topics. So let's just do a quick recap of all the topics that we have completed. Last day we ended with smoke testing, right?
yeah.
Okay, and the thing that I asked you is to check what's the difference between smoke testing and
No,
sanity testing.
no. I'm sorry. I did not. I did
Okay,
not do
okay,
that assignment.
okay, no issues. So the difference between smoke testing and sanity, so this is a very common question for interview.
Uh-huh.
So either they will ask you what's the difference between regression testing and retesting,
Mhm.
otherwise, or maybe they can ask both, what is smoke testing and sanity testing. Okay, so this is a very common question in interview and they normally ask this. So okay, so do you remember what's the difference between regression testing and retesting?
No, regression, I know it's related to bugs and testing the module again after developing and fixing. I don't know. I'm not very thorough with the last part, but it's not that I didn't understand. I understood, but I did not review that.
Okay, so retesting is basically whenever you are finding a bug and
Uh-huh.
the developer is fixing it, right? So
Yeah.
after the fixation he will send it back to you. So now you need to retest the same bug. You need to check that whether the functionality is working fine or not. The same functionality where the bug was there. So this is
Mhm.
called retesting, right? You
Mhm.
are just confirming that okay, I raised the bug and that has been fixed by the developer and this is now working fine. So that
Mhm.
is retesting. But regression testing is something where you have raised a bug for a functionality and the bug is fixed. So the functionality that was there, some other functionalities are related to that functionality.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we discussed about that, right? If there are
Yeah.
four functionalities like A, B, C, and D, and they are
Yeah. How
making
it
any
will affect.
changes in A, so
Uh-huh.
as B, C, and D, these are related to or dependent to functionality A, and there are some code changes in functionality A, so we need to make sure that there are no effects of that code changing in the functionalities B, C, and D. So we need
Mhm.
to make sure that this B, C, and D functionalities are working fine as well. So we need to test this B, C, and D as well, and that is called regression testing. So
Mhm.
because of some code changes in other functionality or some new additional functionalities that have been added in the software, it might affect the other functionalities which are dependent on this functionality or which are related to this functionality. So
Mhm.
we need to test those related functionalities as well, and that is called regression testing. So this
Mhm.
is this is very common. Okay, so you need to remember it. This is very common question, and this is normally asked in the interviews.
Okay.
So this thing you need to remember. I think Gaurav has okay, he has left. Okay, so that is the first thing, and the next thing is sanity and smoke testing. Okay, so smoke testing is something that we discussed last day, and smoke testing is basically whenever you are getting a build from the developers. Okay, so whenever you are
Mhm.
getting the build from the developer, so you don't start your testing with the test cases and all. So what we do is we first check whether the build is stable enough or not. Okay, whether we can actually install the build, or we can actually log in and go through the common functionality, go through the pages, whether we are able to navigate from one page to another page or not. So if we're getting some road blockers there, or if we are not able to even install the application, so in that case there is no meaning of doing our testing, right? Because we can't proceed with that application or with that build. So that's why whenever we get a build from the developers for testing, first we do very basic level of testing without going through the test cases and all. Just we try to install the build, we try to navigate from one page to another page, just to make sure that okay, the build is stable build and we can do our testing on this, and then we start our actual testing by going through the test cases and doing the steps and all. So that
Mhm.
that is something which is called smoke testing.
Okay.
Now, what is sanity testing? Sanity testing is basically whenever the developer is giving you the build after the bug fixes, or like some added functionalities, they have added a few functionalities. So at that time, you need to make sure that whether those changes are working fine or not. So that is called sanity testing.
Okay. So
So this
smoke
is
testing, I understand, is at the beginning, and sanity is at the beginning of the testing itself.
smoke testing is for the first time. Suppose you are getting the
Yeah.
build, so you need to
Uh-huh.
just make sure that the build is stable enough. So that
Right.
is smoke testing.
Smoke test. Right.
Sanity testing is whenever they are providing you
The,
build with the uh, bug fixes, or they have added some new functionality. So at that time you need to test whether those are working fine or not. So that is sanity.
Mhm.
Okay. Uh, okay. Then on the very first class we were talking about error, bug, and failure, if you remember.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, so we'll just
These,
do.
yeah. Error, this is made during the development stage where the
Yeah.
developer, these are all different, the differences I just studied. And the errors will lead to a defect. Errors could lead to a defect, and defect, the error found by a tester is called as a defect.
Mm-hmm.
Finding defects is the tester's most important task.
Yes.
And when defects they are not detected properly, it will lead to failure. This the application or the build will not meet the requirements of the customer. When the customer or the client tests it, that's failure.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, then we were talking about the principles of software testing as well. So, do you
Yeah.
remember? Do you
Yeah.
remember
You
the
told about
principles?
7 principles, I think. 7 principles.
Yes.
Testing will show the presence of defects.
Yes.
And then early testing is always recommended to keep away from loss and all that.
Yeah.
Then you told that exhaustive testing is not possible. Even with the best testing, there could be some bugs.
Yes. Yeah.
And then defect clustering of all those defects. I had a question at that time and you explained it.
Mm-hmm.
Then hmm, pesticide paradox.
Yeah.
Then the last one was absence of errors fallacy, but you also told testing is dependent on the context.
Yes. Yes. So, do you remember? Because if they might ask you what is defect clustering, or what is pesticide paradox. So, do you remember those? The meaning of those?
Yeah, so in defect clustering, I understand there are a lot of defects and they are interrelated in the modules. And this could be complicated. So about that 80% and 20, that 80% of the defects found and 20% of the thing, and we follow the Pareto principle, you said.
Yes. So defect clustering is basically if we are having a particular application or software can have different modules, but not all the modules are complex, right? There would be some complex modules where maximum number of defects will be there. So
Defects are found.
suppose there are 20% of the modules which are complex, and will get 80% of the total defects from those 20% modules. So that is called
Mhm.
defect clustering. So that means we need to test those 20% of the modules in a better way, so that we can find
Mhm.
most of the defects out of there.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
there was pesticide paradox, which means that we
Yeah.
if we use same
same
test
kind of
cases again
tests
and
we do
again,
it
so
again
we'll
and
not
again, we cannot
yes,
find. So we have to check the testing principles or different tests we have to always implement and then find out.
yes,
It's not
absolutely.
going to give.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that was the different principles of testing. After that, we talked about verification and validation as well, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
in the
Very.
verification, we
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Verification is to check the system is developed as per the requirements. And this validation is at the end. Validation is to ensure that once we have something ready, all that we have developed is according to the requirements. And in your language, you said the actual behavior and the expected behavior should be the same.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. After that, we learned about priority and severity as well.
Yeah. Priority and severity, these are parts of a bug report.
Mm-hmm.
So severity could lead to financial losses. Severity shows how much it is affecting the functionality. The bug is affecting the functionality of the application. In then priority, this is just telling us how quickly the defect needs to be fixed by the developer.
Yeah,
The
yes,
functionality is affected, only the severity, and the priority is saying how quickly it has to be fixed. So you
yes.
talk about 4 different types: high priority, high
Yeah,
severity.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Then we talked about STLC and STLC as well, software development life cycle
Yeah,
and software test life cycle. So that is, I think you should remember, like there are different phases of software development life cycle, and software
yeah.
testing life cycle is a integral part of the software development life cycle, right? Then
Yeah.
we talked about
1 minute. It went off the video. 1 minute. I don't know what happened here.
my video went off.
Yeah. It's
Um,
Zoom.
is it coming now?
No, I'm trying. Maybe I'll join again. 1 minute. 1 minute.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Open Zoom. Yeah, it came back. I'll close the
Okay,
other screen. Yeah. Oh no.
okay. So then there were some sequential SDLC models. Do you
Yeah.
remember what were those?
Waterfall is sequential and the V model is sequential.
Absolutely, absolutely. Waterfall and V model were there, which were sequential, and in those cases, we can't go back to one phase which is completed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why
Mm-hmm.
it's sequential. Okay. So then there were some models like iterative model, incremental model, RAD model, prototype model, spiral model, and agile model, right?
Spiral
So
model, I remember the most important thing you said was risk analysis. Divided
yes,
into 4 phases: risk analysis. It is expensive because more skilled developers are needed.
yes.
That's spiral one, I remember.
What was the special about RAD model?
It's RAD is rapid development.
Mm-hmm.
You need more skills because automation principles or something, tools or something is used about. It is expensive too, RAD, but you said it is not very popularly used.
Yeah. So in RAD, there were some models which were developed, right? Like the data model, the process model, and according to that, the code has we use some automated software to write the
Mhm.
code. So that's why it's a very costly model as well, because there are the principles of automated software which you need to use, and also it requires a very experienced and very well versed resources as well, because those models has to be prepared, and out of that the
Mhm.
code will be written by the automated software. So that's
Mhm.
why RAD is a costly model, and also like it's not very much popular. Okay. Then we talked about different levels of testing as well, right? Component testing, component integration testing, system testing, and system integration testing. So I hope
Yeah,
that is clear. We talked about stub and driver as well there in the
yeah,
component and component integration testing. So why
yeah.
do we use the stub?
Stub is this is actually the mimicking part of the software that is missing, and when you
Mm-hmm.
want to call the other part in And when you want to, that is from the bottom up testing. When the driver is missing the mimicking part, no, the stub is, wait, yeah, the stub is used, the lower one is the component, the B is the stub.
Yeah. So there were two approaches, right? One is
Yeah.
top-down approach, one is bottom-up approach.
Uh-huh.
So where do we use stub? In top-down approach or in bottom-up approach?
Top down.
Top down, yes, correct. Because top down is basically when we are testing, we are starting the testing with the top level, and stub
Mm-hmm.
always remains in the bottom level, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we are starting the testing with top level, so you just need to remember that driver is on top and stub is on the bottom
Yeah.
side.
Uh-huh.
So if we are doing the top down approach, then the
Stub.
modules which are in the top level that are present, but we don't have the modules in the bottom level,
Yeah.
right? So that's why we need some mimicking software or some simulators which will act as the bottom level layers or bottom level
Mm-hmm.
components. So those are called
Mm-hmm.
stub. And driver is basically when the upper level module is missing, and we are doing the bottom up approach, we are testing with the bottom up approach. So at that time the modules from the bottom level are present, but we need some software or some mimicking software or simulators which will act as the top level module. So that is called driver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we were talking about the black box testing and white box testing. So this is also a very important question for interview. So what is black box testing and what is white box testing?
In black box testing, you said it's used in functional, non-functional, other kinds of testing. In this, the testers will not have any knowledge of what is inside that box, or the
Hmm.
is just input and output that they are testing.
Yeah. So this is basically the tester won't have the idea of the structure or the coding of the
Mm-hmm.
software component.
Mm-hmm.
So if you mention this term, that will be good in the interview, that the tester don't have the knowledge of the internal structure and architecture of the software component. They just
Okay,
know what will go input and what will be the output. So that is what is black box
can you
testing.
repeat that for me? Testers do not have knowledge of the code, right?
Tester do not have the knowledge of the internal structure and the architecture of the software component.
Okay.
And in case of white box testing, it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
The tester does have the knowledge of the internal architecture and the structure of the coding of the
Mm-hmm.
software, and that's why he can test accordingly. So that's why it's a glass box. The internal structure is visible by the tester.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we discussed about different type of functional testing, non-functional testing. Regression retesting was there, and sanity smoke testing. So that's where we ended the class last week, right? Okay, so we'll proceed from there. I'll just start my screen sharing. Okay, so hope my screen is visible.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So welcome to the seventh session of our QA training. And today we are going to learn something which is mostly used in the verification process. Okay, so we know the difference between verification and validation. So today we are going to cover the static technique. Okay, where
Mhm.
mostly this is used in the verification part of the life cycle. So in the verification part, we knew, right, we normally do the code review, we normally review the documents and all, and we don't actually do our we don't actually test or execute our test there, because we don't have the software, right? That is in the development phase. The verification happens in the development phase, and in that phase the software is being developed, right?
Mhm.
So when the software is being developed, you don't have anything as such to execute our tests. Rather, you can verify that whatever is being developed, so that is being developed according to the requirement. That's what we do in the verification process. And so in this process, it's mostly we do the reviews, and like the code work through the technical review, the inspection. So these are different type of reviews that are done in the static technique, or in the verification process. So we are going to look at that. Mostly we
But who
will.
does this? Who does this?
So this is normally done by the
Developer?
developers, the
Mhm.
architects, the SMEs are also involved there. SMEs mean the experts, okay, the software module experts. So the architects, the developers, and also it could happen that the testers are also involved in that, because when you are reviewing the requirement documents and all, at that time the tester need to be get involved, because they need to understand the requirements as well, right?
Mhm.
So that's why uh, I would say that testers are always not involved in all the review meetings. But yes, if we are reviewing the requirement document or any other document, so in that case, the testers get involved, or they they attend those meetings, because from that those meetings, the testers can derive their planning of testing. So I will give you the examples later. So the testers normally attend those meetings, but the architects, the developers, and the SMEs, so those are the main person who get involved in this verification process, or in the static techniques.
Mhm.
So there are different tools as well which we use in the static technique, like to check the coding standard, to check the code metrics, and the code structure and all. But again, these are used by the developers only. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, Today's session is a bit a bit of kind of session which is not very much important. I'd be very honest with you. It's good to have this knowledge, but there is a very less chance that you will get any question in your interview while you attend anything, right? So
Mhm.
this is something that is not asked normally. And another thing is, this is not something where we testers get very much involved as well. Okay, so
Okay.
from the practical perspective also, that as a tester you won't get much involved in this static technique. Yes, I mean, to go through the requirement document, or to understand the requirement document, to analyze the requirement document, or to at least attend the meetings to see how the behavior of the system is getting changed, or how they are implementing the different decision tables. Okay, so we talked about the decision tables and all. So those, how are they getting implemented, and how do you need to test those things? So to understand, those people from the testing background normally attends on those meetings, but we don't derive the meetings or drive the meetings at all. Okay,
Mhm.
so let's start with the static test technique. So what is static test technique? So static test technique is basically done in the verification phase, which I already told you. So this is a test technique which is normally a powerful way to improve the quality and productivity of the software development. And the goal of static test technique is to find bugs as soon as possible, because in the static technique test technique, when we are doing the review, when we are going through the code, we are doing the walkthrough of the code, and we are doing the inspection and all. So at that time we will find the errors, right?
Mhm.
Rather than using the defect, it's better if we use the term error. So if we find those errors in the early process, so that doesn't that actually stops the defects to flow in the lower level, and that will also help the developers to fix those bugs as soon as possible, right? So that's why the static test technique is useful. And test technique is it's normally not done using any we don't actually execute our tests in the static test in this process, because we don't have any software in our hand to test it. So that's why it's basically the testing of different documents, or it's basically reviewing of different documents, or it could be the review of the source code as well, the design documents, the different models. So uh, the functional specification, the requirement specification, so those are normally tested or reviewed in the static test technique. And we don't need some computer as well in this testing phase, because we are just going to review the code that are being written, or we are going to review the particular documents that are getting generated in the verification process. So that's why we don't need any kind of software, or rather than using the software term, we can say that we don't need any particular computer system to do this kind of static testing. Okay.
Mhm.
So the first thing that is written here is static test technique provide a powerful way to improve the quality and productivity of software development. This chapter describes static techniques, including reviews, and provides an overview of how they are conducted. The fundamental objective of testing is to improve the quality of software work product by assisting engineers to recognize and fix their own defects early in the software development process. Because when the developers are developing, so they, if they are making any mistake, that code will be reviewed in the static test technique. Okay, so when the code is getting reviewed by the peers, by the colleagues, or some subject matter expert, SMEs, or the architects, so at that time if they are making any mistake, so that will be caught, right? And if that will be caught, then that will be fixed by the developer himself. So now we are getting the defects, or we are catching those errors at the earlier phase, so that improves the quality of the software, right? So that's why it is important. And while static testing techniques will not solve all the problems, they are enormously effective. So it's not possible to solve all the problems. So if we are getting all the problems solved there, so in that case we don't need those like component integration testing or system testing, right? The acceptance
Mhm.
testing or not. So that's why it won't give you, or it won't help you to catch all the problems. But still, the more defects, or the more errors you catch in this particular phase, the more it helps you to improve the quality of the software, because all those errors which are getting caught here, so those will be fixed in this phase itself. So those are
Mhm.
not flowing to the next phase. So that's it's very much helpful to improve the quality of the software. The next is static techniques can improve both quality and productivity by impressive factor. Static techniques is not magic, and it should not be considered a replacement for dynamic testing. So what is dynamic testing? Dynamic testing is basically the other testings that we perform during our validation phase. So during our validation phase, the component testing, the component integration testing, the system testing, the system integration testing, the acceptance testing. In the acceptance testing, there were two types of testing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, one is done by the developer and client, and the other one, I remember. The other one is done by the real-time users.
Yeah. So one was the alpha
And beta.
testing, and the second was
Uh-huh.
is the beta testing.
Yeah.
So in the alpha testing, the person from the development team, so the development team means it doesn't mean that the developers. Okay, one thing that you have to be very clear, that in the alpha testing, some team members from the development company, the company which is developing the software, so some members from that company, it could be testers, it could be the SMEs, it could be the business analyst, or the stakeholder. So some people from the development company, and some people from the test from the client or the customer side. So they will test the software together. So that is called alpha testing. And then beta testing, as you told, like some of the
Real
real time
time.
users, so the software will be given to them and they will use that, they will test that and give the feedback to the customer, and based on those feedback the changes will be made or the bugs will be fixed. So all this comes under the dynamic testing. Okay, so now I mean, we can't
That
say that. Yeah, sorry.
is all this comes under dynamic testing.
Yes.
Mhm.
So the component testing, the component integration testing, the system integration testing, acceptance testing, so these are done in the which process? These are done in the validation process,
Mhm.
right? So in the validation process, whenever you are testing something, so you have the software or you have the component to test it.
Oh, okay, okay.
So that's why it's in the validation process, and that's why it's called dynamic testing. But
Mhm.
in the static testing, in the static test technique, you don't have a software to validate. So normally what we'll do, you will review the documents, you will review the code. So that's what we can do in the static test technique.
Mhm.
Okay, so so we can't say the static test technique is a replacement of dynamic test technique. Rather we can say they complements each other. Static test technique will complement the dynamic test technique, because if we are performing the static test technique, that will reduce the number of error or bugs present in the software.
Mhm.
Okay, so static testing is not magic and should not be considered a replacement for dynamic testing, but all software organizations should consider using reviews in all major aspect of their work, including requirement design, implementation, testing, and maintenance. Static analysis tools implement automated checks, example on code. So when we are doing the code review, so there are some automated tools or static analysis tools which are present in the market, which can do the code review by itself. But it's always recommended that you should do the peer review as well. So peer review is normally done whenever the developer is completed or has completed a particular coding. So he should get it reviewed by his peers as well, so that if there is something that he has missed, his peers can come into the picture, review the code, and give their feedback on the code.
Mhm.
And after that it can be reviewed by some automated checks as well. So all these things are like exactly not required for you to remember, and these are not important as well from the interview perspective, but it's good to know. Then static testing is the testing of the software work products manually or with a set of tools, but they are not executed. So basically, as I mentioned, the test cases are not executed in this phase. Okay, so basically the review is done in this phase. It starts early in the life cycle, and so it is done during the verification process, which I already told you. It doesn't need a computer as a testing of program done without executing the program. For example, reviewing walkthrough, inspection, and all. So we don't execute the program there. We don't execute the code and see the software there. No, we don't do that. We just do the review of the code here. Okay.
Okay.
And most static testing techniques can be used to test any form of document, including the source code, the design documents and models, the functional specification, and requirement specification. Okay.
Mhm.
So the static testing and the dynamic testing we have already discussed. I don't think we have anything to discuss from here. Okay. So
Okay.
you can just go through it once. Now only you can go through it once. And if you have any query, you can ask me. I think we have covered
Yeah.
everything from here.
Mhm. Yeah, it says in static testing, how can we evaluate or analyze a requirement document, test plan, or user manual?
Yeah. Sorry, did you ask anything?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a good question, right? In static testing,
Mm-hmm.
even how can we evaluate or analyze a requirements document, a design document, a test plan, or a user manual? Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So uh, in the static testing, what we do is basically we review the documents that are getting generated, right? So the that includes the requirement document, the design document that the uh, developers I mean have developed. So they prepare the design document for that as well. Then from the testing end, we generate the test plan, we write the test plan. So that has to be reviewed as well, because if you're writing a test plan, so that includes a lot of things. We'll talk about what is test plan, what is
Mhm.
test scenario document, what are the test cases document in the later classes. But what you need to understand is basically these are the documents, right, which are the outcome in the verification process. So all
Mhm.
these documents has to be reviewed. So that is
Mhm.
normally done in the static testing phase.
Mhm. Okay. Let's go. Yeah. No
Okay,
question.
okay, fine. So the only thing, the main primary thing that you need to remember the difference between static testing and dynamic testing is, the first one is the static testing is performed in the verification process. Dynamic testing is performed as the in the validation process, right? The
Yeah.
next thing is, in case of static testing, we don't execute any code, or we don't test any software. Okay, this thing you need to remember. In the static
Mhm.
testing phase, we don't test the software, rather we test the outcomes like the design document, the requirement document, or the test plan. So we normally review this kind of documents or the outcome of the development, or
Mhm.
in fact the code as well. We review the code as well that the developers are writing. But in case of dynamic testing, what we do, we execute our test cases, we test the software, but we don't do that in the static testing.
Mhm.
So these are the main differences between static testing and dynamic testing. Okay, so what are the advantages of static testing? So if you understand, you can tell by yourself what are the advantages of static testing. So the first one is, you can detect the defect early, right?
Mhm.
So whatever errors the developers are making, or even as a tester also, like if you are generating the test plan, if you are writing the test plan, and if you're if making any mistake there, so that can be caught during the review phase, and those errors can be resolved there. So by detecting defects at an early stage, rework costs are more often relatively low, and thus a relatively cheap improvement of quality of software products can be achieved. Because if you are fixing the defects at an early stage, so rework costs are less, right? Because when
Mhm.
you are fixing the defects at the later stage, so that requires a lot of changes as well, because all the components are integrated. And if you're making any code changes in a particular feature, that might affect the other features as well. But here, as you are in the development phase itself, rework and fixations are less costly here. So that means your improvement of the quality, or like overall software quality, is better in that case.
Mhm.
Then static testing can start early in the life cycle, right? Early feedback or quality issues can be established. Example, an early validation of user requirement and not just late in the life cycle during acceptance testing. So obviously, like as we are verifying or reviewing the requirements document as well, like the software requirement SRS document or BRS document, business requirement specification, or software requirement specification. So these are the different type of requirement document. So as we are reviewing those, and if there is any issue or any feedback required on those documents, so we can get those in the early stage. So as like we are getting the feedback at the early stage on the requirement document, so that is so the developers are getting that and the testers are also getting that. So now the developers can develop according to the updated requirement document, right? So that reduces the confusion between the development and testing team as well, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Then since rework effort is substantially reduced, development productivity figures are likely to increase. Obviously, as the rework effort is less, so there would be less rework that is required in the latter stages of the development, right? The
Mhm.
evaluation by a team has the additional advantage that there is an exchange of information between the participants. Now, as we discussed, that different teams will be getting involved in the review phase. The development team will be there, the testing team will be there, the architects will be there, the subject matter experts will be there, the business analyst will be there. And when they're reviewing, they're providing their input and they're sharing their idea as well. So the exchange of information between the participants is happening, and that will reduce the confusion, or there are any, if there are any information gap between the teams, so that will be reduced here, right?
Mhm.
And static tests contribute to an increased awareness of quality issues. Obviously, if there is any quality issue, so that will be discussed in these review meetings, and uh, it will create an increased awareness of those issues. Okay. So in conclusion, static testing is a very suitable method for improving the quality of software work products. This applies primarily to the assessed products themselves, but it is also important that the quality improvement is not achieved once, but has a more structural character. The feedback from the static testing process to the development process allows for process improvement, which supports the avoidance of similar errors being made in the future. I think we have already covered these things.
Mhm.
Okay. So now we'll talk about the review process. Okay. So how this review process is done, and what are the different stages that this review process is have. So the review process can be informal review, or it could be formal review as well. So there are different type of review process that we'll look at. So there is inspection, there is code walkthrough, and there is another one which is, I guess, technical review. Okay, so these are the different type of review that we have. So in the code walkthrough, we normally go through the code and all. In the technical review, what we do is we see the technical documents, the design documents and all, and inspection. So this could be formal and informal both. Okay.
Mhm.
So what are the different phases of this? The first is the planning, then the kickoff, then there will be a preparation phase, then the actual meeting where the review will be done. Then based on the review meeting, the rework will be done and the follow-up will be done. And then there are different kind of roles as well, which and those roles are actually the participant of this review meeting. Okay. So
Mhm.
the, what do you understand by the formal meeting? So formal meeting are well structured and regulated. All these phases will be there. In an informal meeting, these phases are not mandatorily present. Okay. So informal meeting is what? Basically, suppose you are the developer. Okay. Or suppose you are the tester who is writing the test plan, and while writing the test plan, you are checking the requirement document as well, because from the requirement document, by referring to the requirement document, you will write your test plan, right? So while preparing the test plan, suppose you have some doubt or some you need some clarification regarding a certain requirement. So what will you do? There are two way. Either you can arrange a formal meeting, or you can just drop a mail to the customer, referring to the requirement, and you can ask your question there. Now suppose the uh, customer side, from the customer side they're saying, okay, let's have a quick call and let's discuss about this. Okay, so you have a quick call with him, and he or she from the customer side, they actually clarifies you what is the meaning of that particular requirement, and then you write your test plan accordingly. So that is kind of an informal meeting, informal review, and where the the discussions are not properly documented as well. So that is also a very important difference between a formal and an informal review meeting. In case of formal review meetings, everything is documented, but in case of informal meetings, things are not properly documented as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So as we look that there are three type of review meetings. One is inspection, one is review, or rather code walkthrough, and one is the technical review. So the inspection is the most formal review technique, and in the inspection phase everything is documented, and it's the most formal review technique. But apart from the inspection, like as we had have the technical review or the walkthrough as well, so those we document those meetings as well, but not like the inspection one. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so the formality of a review process is related to factors such as maturity of the development process, any legal or regulatory requirements, or the need for an audit trial. So these are normally linked to the inspection phase. In the inspection phase, we normally do such things to check whether whatever we are doing, those meets legal or regulatory requirements or not, or if there is any kind of audit trial. So those are related to the inspection phase. In practice, the informal review is perhaps the most common type of review. As I mentioned you, normally whenever we have any doubt or any clarification is required, we normally do the informal review. But like whenever we have something where uh, it is required that all the participants should be there. Like if I give you an example, if we need to do the review of the SRS document, the requirement specification document, or the BRS document. At that time, all the members should be present there, because all the members are going to refer to the requirement specification document or the business requirement specification document. Now, in those review process, it normally we arrange the formal review where all these stages are followed, right? The planning is done, the kickoff is done, the preparation is done, then the review meeting is happens, and after the review meeting we make the notes of the different feedbacks, and then based on those the owner or the author does the rework, and then it is followed up. Okay, so in case of
Mhm.
informal review, normally it's a two-person review. Okay, suppose you have any query, you are connecting to someone who knows, who has the query. It can be anyone. It might happen that the developer has the knowledge and he is providing you the knowledge, and that can happen through an informal review as well. Okay, suppose a
Mhm.
developer has written some code and he has asked his peer to review the code or document the code. Okay, so this can be the informal review, and this can come in various shapes and forms as well. It's not mandatory that always you'll have a call with the reviewer or in between the team. It can happen through the mails as well. You have sent the document to them for review, and they have just reviewed them and gave back the feedbacks to you. So this is not mandatorily that you will always have the meeting. It can happen through the mails and through other forms as well. Okay, and in case of
Mhm.
informal review, those are not very much documented. Yes, there will be something which has to be documented. Suppose after the call, the customer thinks that there should be some changes in the requirement itself. So in that case, it has to be documented, and it has to be forwarded to all the teams so that they get the updated requirement.
Mhm.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break here, and after the break what we'll do is we'll understand what is it, what is done in these different phases. That is the first thing, and the next thing is we'll look at the different type of participants of this review process. So there are different type of participants as well, and finally we'll look at the differences between the inspection, the technical review, and the walkthrough as well. Okay,
Mhm. Mhm.
we'll just take a 5-minute break and we'll resume from there.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Okay, so do you have any query until now?
No.
I know this is a bit, boring session because this is almost like everything is too much theoretical here, and these are not very much related to our work as well. Like as a
Okay.
tester, you won't get much involvement in these things. The only
No.
thing that will be involved here is as a tester, you need to get involved in the requirement review meetings, but other than that mostly it will be the developers and the architects who will be involved here. So yeah, this
Mhm.
I too agree that this is a bit boring, but anyway, I mean, it's better to have the basic idea or basic knowledge of this thing. Okay, yeah, so it will be better, I know, if after the class just spend some time to just go through the slide once, so that will be enough. Other
Okay.
than that, you are not required to remember anything from this particular class. Okay, so what are the different phases of formal review meeting that we already discussed? The first is
Mhm.
planning. So what is done in the planning meeting? So in the planning meeting, so there are different kind of participants who actually attend the meeting. So the first one is the moderator. Okay, so the moderator actually drive the meeting. So it is the duty of the moderator in the planning phase. Okay, so what he or she does, he or she actually talks to the author. So author is basically who owns the document or who has created the document, and after that he will schedule the meetings. Okay, the next meetings which are required for the formal review. So the moderator will plan accordingly. He will talk to the author of
Mhm.
that document, and then he will plan the next meetings accordingly. He will create those meetings, or he will be the one who will communicate between different teams and all. Okay, so that is done in
Mhm.
the planning phase. Then the kickoff. So kickoff is basically before we start our actual review meeting. In the kickoff, the basic idea of or like the introduction, a short introduction on the objective of the review meeting, and the documents are given to all the participants. So what is the requirement of that? So that the participants can prepare on the agenda, and they can come prepared with their questions and all. Okay, so that is the requirement of the or that is the that is done in the kickoff phase. After that, the preparation is done. So what is done in the preparation? So normally all the participants will work individually on the documents that is going to be reviewed, and based on that, if they have, the participants do have any query, or they have got any discrepancy in between the expected and the actual, or they have any kind of questions or comments, so they can document those, and they, in the review meeting, they can ask those or log those. Okay,
Mhm.
so you can just read this through once and you'll be able to
Yeah.
understand. I mean, there is not anything else to understand from these
Yeah.
topics.
I'll read
Okay.
through.
Okay, yeah. So after that we have the review meeting, and in the review meeting normally, like, there will be a scriber. So the scribe will actually document everything. Other than that, it is driven by the owner or the author of the uh, product that is getting reviewed. It could be the software design documents, or it could be the code that is getting reviewed. So whoever is author, he will drive the meeting, and he will give the overall presentation. And then the participants who have identified the defects, or who is having any queries, who is having any questions or feedback, so they will provide their feedback, which will be again documented. And based on this feedback, based on the questions, based on the defects that have been caught in the review meeting, the author will now rework on those. Okay, and once
Mhm.
those are reworked and those are fixed, so it will be the duty of the moderator to follow up with the author, that whether those rework is completed or not. And once the rework is completed, the moderator will forward those final documents to all the participants.
Mhm.
So that is the different phases. Now if you just read through this, you'll be understand, but the core is this. Like, the review meeting, the meeting typically consists of the following elements, partly depending on the review type: logging phase, discussion phase, and decision phase. If an issue needs discussion, the item is logged and then handled in the discussion phase. A detailed discussion on whether or not an issue is a defect is not very meaningful, as it is much more efficient to simply log it and proceed to the next one. Every defect and its severity should be logged. The participant who identifies the defect proposes the severity. Severity classes could be critical, major, and minor. So we already knew this, and this is not something that is very much important from our perspective. In the rework,
Mhm.
based on the defects detected, the author will improve the document under review step by step. Not every defect that is found leads to rework. Obviously, I mean, it's not like anything and everything that you were getting from the review meeting you need to rework on those which needs rework, you will work on that. And it's the author's responsibility to judge if a defect has to be fixed or not. If nothing is done about an issue for a certain reason, it should be reported to at least indicate that the author has considered the issue. And in the follow-up phase, the moderator is responsible for ensuring that satisfactory actions have been taken on all log defects, process improvement suggestions, and change requests. Although the moderator checks to make sure that the author has taken action on all known defects, it is not necessary for the moderator to check all the corrections in detail. If it decided that the all participants will check the updated document, the moderator takes care of the distribution and collects the feedback. For more formal review types, the moderator checks for compliance to the exit criteria. Okay.
Mhm.
I don't think you have any query or doubts from this.
No.
Okay. So what are the different roles and responsibilities? So first, the moderator. So we already discussed the role of the moderator. So he will actually lead the review process, and he will actually drive the meetings and all. So he or she determines, in cooperation with the author, the type of review approach and the composition of the review team, who will be the participants of the review, whether we need the testers, whether we need the architects, who will be actually participating the meeting. So those are uh, I mean, those are the things that the moderator decides along with the author. Okay, the moderator performs all the entry check and the follow up on the rework. So what is the entry check? The entry check is basically whether we have the planning or not, or kickoff is happening or not, or the documents are being forwarded to all the participants or not, so that the participants can do their preparation and they come prepared in the review meeting. So those things are the responsibility of the moderator. The moderator also schedules the meeting, disseminates documents before the meeting, coaches other team members, paces the meeting, leads possible discussion, and stores the data that is collected. So these are the responsibilities of the moderator. What is the responsibility of the author? As the writer of the document under review, the author's basic goal should be to learn as much as possible with regard to improving the quality of the document. So whatever feedback they are getting, whatever defect that is being discussed during the review meeting, so the author needs to go through all those, and then he needs to decide what are the feedback or what are the rework that he needs to do, and then accordingly he will implement those. Okay.
Mhm.
Then the scribe. So basically the responsibility of the scribe is to document everything, log everything that is being discussed during the meeting. Okay. So it can happen that the author is doing the logging and the documenting thing. So if the author is himself doing that, so in that case we don't need a separate role or the separate scribe there. But it's always like recommended that a separate scribe should be there, so that the author can concentrate on the reviews and all the discussions that is going on in the review phase. Okay. During
Mhm.
the logging meeting, the scribe or recorder has to record each defect mentioned and any suggestions for process improvement. In practice, it is often the author who plays the role, ensuring that the log is readable and understandable. However, having someone other than the author take the role of the scribe can have significant advantages, since the author is freed up to think about the document rather than being tied down with lots of writing. So I think it's clear to you.
Mhm.
Okay. Then the reviewers, the other participants who are actually participating in the review meeting. So they are the reviewers. They are also called as checkers or inspectors. So they will actually in the preparation phase, they will prepare, they will go through the documents that have been sent to them, and they will try to find the defects out of that. So there are different type of people who can be the reviewers. It can be the domain expert or the architects who are having the technical expertise. It can be the testers as well and the stakeholders as well. So reviewers should be chosen to represent different perspective and roles in the review process. In addition to the document under review, the material reviewers receive include source documents, standard checklists, etc. In general, the fewer source and reference documents provided, the more domain expertise regarding the content of the document under review is needed. So if you're providing less source, less reference documents, so in that case, the reviewer should have more domain expertise, okay, to understand the document and to understand the technology as well. And finally the manager. So the manager is basically who is having all the knowledge and who is handling all the team members. So as like he or she decides the execution of reviews, allocates time, or checks the project schedule, determine whether the review process objectives have been met or not, and he will also take care of the review training requested by the participants. Of course, the manager can also be involved in the review itself, depending on his or her technical or his or her technical abilities.
Mhm.
So any queries? I know this is very boring, but any queries if you have?
No, I'll just read it.
Okay, okay, fine. There is nothing to understand from this slide, so that's why
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
better just to go through it, and I don't think we'll have any query out of this as well.
Mhm.
So as we mentioned, there are different type of reviews: the walkthrough, the technical review, and the inspection. So walkthrough is a formal type of review. Then we have the technical review. So technical review is not much like I would say formal, like it's like an informal review. And then inspection is something that is the most formal type of review. Okay. So what is walkthrough? So walkthrough is basically in case of walkthrough we might need some preparation. Okay, so in this case, like the author will drive the meeting. Okay, so he will explain whatever he has written in the content or in the document, and then he will ask the participants if the participants have any kind of like feedback, or if they find any kind of defect here. Okay, and the audience could be from various from various skills or discipline. It can be from the architects, or it can be from the technical development team, or it can be to the testers, or it can be the stakeholders of the client as well. Okay,
Mhm.
and in this case so this is kind of a formal meeting. And in the walkthrough, so normally what is done is whatever documents you are having, so if you are the author of the document, you will go through each and every section of the document, and then based on the review or based on the feedback that you are getting from the audience, you will make the changes in the document, and then it will be distributed among all the participants. So that is all that is done in the walkthrough. So a walkthrough is characterized by the author of the document under review guiding the participants through the document and his or her thought process to achieve a common understanding and to gather feedback. So normally we do the walkthrough of the requirement document. Okay. Other than that, if we are doing any kind of design document or any planning document, so those are the review of those documents are done using the walkthrough type of review. So the content of the review of the document is explained step by the author to reach consensus on changes or to gather information. Within a walkthrough, the author does most of the preparation. The participants who are selected from different department and backgrounds are not required to do a detailed study of the documents in advance. If the audience represent a broad cross section of skills or and discipline, it can give assurance that no major defects are missed in the walkthrough. A walkthrough is especially useful for higher level documents such as requirement specification and documents. Okay. So what are the goals and characteristic of the walkthrough? So normally, like the meeting is led by the author. The walkthrough meeting is led by the author, and it is a separate pre-planning meeting or pre-meeting preparation is optional. We don't need as such the preparation meeting and all. And we can maybe, as we mentioned, the dry run of the document will be done by the author itself. Okay, and what is the goal? The goal is to have a common understanding of the document. Okay, so to explain the document to all the participants, that is done. So that is also a goal. And to understand the requirement document, so normally, as I mentioned, the walkthrough of the requirement document is done. So based after the walkthrough, all the participants should have the idea or should have the knowledge of the actual requirement. So the knowledge transfer is done in this type of review. Okay,
Mhm.
any query, any
No.
question?
Mhm.
Okay, so after that we have the technical review. So technical review is a discussion meeting where basically the code is checked. Okay, so this is normally done by the developers and the architects. Okay, the chief designers, they normally are the participants of this type of review. And this is are less formal than the inspection or like the walkthrough type of review. So here normally the after the coding is completed, what or the designing is completed, after that the developer can sit with the architects, or the developer can sit with the with his peers and do such kind of review activity. Okay.
Mhm.
So it can be quite informal, but in some cases it can be formal as well. Okay. So what are the goals and characteristics of this technical review? So the first thing is basically the technical concept and what could be the alternative options. So those are discussed in the technical review. Okay. They establish the consistency in the use and representation of technical concept. So basically the technical things are discussed here, and as this is done in the early stage, so the technical concepts are usually corrected. So basically if the developer is thinking something differently, and the architects or the technical expert, they have some other suggestion, so that those things can be discussed here, and based on that, like the author can change his technical approach as well. Okay.
Mhm.
So that is normally done in the technical review, and the characteristic is the defects are like documented here, so that the author can make the changes in his code accordingly. It is often performed as a peer review without management participation, because as like I mentioned that the coding that the developer is doing, so normally the peer review is done, so the managers or like the other stakeholders are not required to join this meeting, because this is more on a technical background. So the managers,
Mhm.
the stakeholders, they are not required to attend this type of review meeting. And ideally it is led by a trained moderator, but possibly also by a technical expert. A separate preparation is carried out during
Mhm.
which the product is examined and the defects are found. More formal characteristics such as the use of checklist and a logging list of issue log are optional. So this is likely to be an informal meeting. So the documenting is done mainly on the errors or bugs that are getting caught. So based on that, the documenting is done. Finally, the inspection. So inspection is the most formal review, and we have all the phases that we were discussing for a review. So all the phases are properly followed here, and we use the using rules and checklist as well here. So in the inspection meeting, the defects are found, the defects which are found are logged, and any discussion is postponed until the discussion phase. So the rule that is followed here is basically whoever is developing, or whoever is creating the document or anything, so he will try to self justify the actions, right? If you will
Mhm.
give him some feedback, or if you will find some defect out of that, so he will try to do the self justification. So
Mhm.
that's why like all the discussions and all, so those are done in the discussion phase, and before that all the inspection is done. So the second point, you can see the reason for carrying out inspection can be explained by using Weinberg's concept of egoless engineering. Weinberg refers to the human tendency to self-justify actions. Since we tend not to see evidence that conflicts with our strong beliefs, our ability to find errors in our own work is impaired. Because of this tendency, many engineering organizations have established independent test groups that specialize in finding defects. So in the inspection phase, normally all type of groups or all type of participants normally joins this, and depending on the organization and the objective of a project, inspection can be balanced to serve a number of goals. For example, if the time to market is extremely important, the emphasis in inspections will be on efficiency. In a safely critical market, the focus will be on effectiveness. So these are really, I mean, theoretical thing, and these are not very much important as well. So the inspection, the goals and characteristic of inspection. So to help the author to improve the quality of the document under inspection, train new employees in the organization's development process, or create a common understanding, improve the product quality, remove defects efficiently, learn from defects found, and improve process in order to prevent recurrence of similar defects. So these are the normal things. I think you can, go through this and you'll be able
Mhm.
to understand.
Mhm.
Okay. Finally, the static analysis by tool. So this is also required by the developer. This is normally done on the code, because whenever the developers are writing any code, so the static analysis is done on this design or the requirement of the code by some of the tools as well. Okay. So it is performed on requirements, design or code without actually executing the software artifact being examined. Static analysis is ideally performed before the type of formal review. So because if you use the static analysis tools to do the static analysis, it will give you a report as well, and based on those report, the formal review can be done. And in the preparation phase as well, those reports can be forwarded to the participants, so that they can also refer to that to those reports, and they can provide their input. Okay. So that's why the static analysis tools are required. Static analysis is unrelated to dynamic properties of the requirement design and code, such as test coverage. The goal of static analysis is to find defects, whether or not they may cause failures, as the review static analysis finds defects rather than failures. These are not very much important, and this is also very much related to the to the development team. So the code they are writing based on their coding standard. Some this static analysis tools provide their analysis based on the coding standard and the complexity, how complex. uh, there are certain numbers which are not very much important, and you won't be able to understand those as well, like the cyclomatic number, the nesting of loops and all those things, the coding standard and all those things. So those are analyzed by these tools, and based on that, some analysis report is provided, and those are passed on to the participants so that they can go through those and understand. So there are two types of thing. One is coding standard and one is code metrics. So a coding standard is whether there are certain standards of writing the code. Okay. So there are certain standards like naming convention, the layout specification. So whenever the developers are writing the code, they have certain coding standard, and these tools can be helpful to analyze the code and provide the feedback whether the coding is following the standards or not. So this is something that the static tools do. And other than that, the code metrics, so that there are different type of code metrics available, like cyclomatic complexity, or the depth of nesting, or the frequencies of the used methods. So those are found using this code metrics. And something is there is something which is related to our testing, that is cyclomatic complexity. So cyclomatic complexity is basically based on the decision table. Okay. So suppose we have different type of option, like the example that we were using during the example of the banking software. Okay. So if you are a normal user, you will get interest rate of 4%. If you are a salaried employee, you will get 6%. If you are suppose a senior citizen, then you will get 8% of interest. So these are different business logic, right?
Mhm.
And depending on this business logic, the developer has to write his code, and there will be different decision making points. So based on this different decision making point or decision tables, there will be cyclomatic complexity metric which will be given by this static analysis tools. And if we look at
Mhm.
the cyclomatic as a tester, if we look at the cyclomatic complexity metric, so if the metric is having a higher value, that means uh, this is a more complex module. Okay, and if it's a more complex module, we need to do more testing for this module. Okay, so that is something that can be related from the testing and the development thing. So
Mhm.
that is something that we can use from our testing perspective. Other than that, it's mostly used by the developers itself.
Okay.
So there are different type of aspect that the developer can use for their coding structure, like control flow structure, data structure. But again, like these are the things that the developers will use. And if I explain these things to you as well, neither these things are required uh, in the in the interview, nor these things are required in your work. Okay, so
Mhm.
this will be like extra information to you which won't be required to you at all. So I'm not going to
Mhm.
explain these things, and you don't need to remember these things as well. These are absolutely not required. Rather, I would say the next class is going to be very much important for us, because we are going to look at the dynamic testing. Okay, and in the dynamic testing, that is something that we are actually going to be involved there. So the next class is very much important, tomorrow's class is very much important, and we are going to understand the different test documentation, the identifying different test conditions. We are going to understand what is the requirement traceability matrix. Then we will jump into the test cases, and this is something that we are getting paid for. We are getting paid for writing the test cases, execution of the test cases, and um, finding the bugs out of those testing. So we are going to understand how these test cases are written, what are the different characteristics of the test cases, what are the procedure of specifying these test scripts, then attributes of a test case, what does a test case contain, and we are going to look at the some sample test case templates as well. Okay, so tomorrow's
Mhm.
class is going to be very much important for us. And for today's class, I will recommend you just go through the slides one. You don't need to remember anything, just go through it once, so that you know what are the different type of reviews that are done in the static
Mhm.
review technique. Okay,
Okay.
so that is all from today's class. Do you have any question?
Now, I was wondering when you were asking those questions at the beginning,
Hmm.
you didn't ask anything about the agile methodology. How important is it from the interview perspective?
From the agile.
Mm-hmm.
So from the agile, like from the interview perspective, what is required is they will ask you, what do you know about agile?
Okay.
Okay, so from the agile, as we discussed, I'll just explain you one more time. I think you took the notes at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I got the notes, but I was wondering why you didn't ask anything. Is it not important?
okay, that is important. I think I that's why on that day itself I shared my screen. I showed you what is followed
Mm-hmm.
in my project as well, right? So that is something which is very much important. And I remember that you took the notes of that thing,
Yeah, yeah.
so that's why
I
I
did.
didn't exclusively ask you.
Okay.
But
Okay.
from the interview perspective, they will ask you that what do you know about agile, what are the different
Mm-hmm.
ceremonies that are
Yeah.
followed in the agile. So if you remember, we had those sprint review,
Mm-hmm.
no, sprint review were coming later, sprint planning, and after the sprint planning we had the backlog grooming, and after that on a daily basis we have the daily stand-up meeting, and then we have the sprint review, the sprint retrospective. So these are the different meeting that are followed. And in the sprint planning itself, we have the estimation. So how the estimation is done, so we have a separate class for all of this. Okay, so I'll
Okay.
explain you all these things in a better way. And that's why I didn't focus much on the agile, because we are going to do a much we are going to dive deep on the agile, because that is what that is being used in most of the projects. So that is very important. Yes, that is very
Mm-hmm.
important, and we are going to have a separate class for that as
Okay.
well. Okay, anything else?
No, no, nothing. Thank you.
Okay, fine then. Have a good night and let's catch up tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
bye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining. Yeah, bye.
You're welcome. Bye.